Good evening. It is 5:30, Tuesday, May 24th, and this is the regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education. I will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance for those able. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda? Jim?
I move approval of the agenda with the addition of the HR addendum that was located at our work location.
Second. Second by Dr. Newman. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the agenda is approved. Moving on to the recognition of the audience. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and home school district for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond or debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 4 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker will be asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the speaker's time at the podium. And 3 individuals have signed up to speak this evening. The first person is Devin Stachinsky.
Forgive me in advance, I'm still letting some Novocaine wear off in my mouth, and I'll be cross-referencing some documents. I just came up here for a little change of pace. I have some questions regarding some of the memos that are in this evening's discussion, and I'm sure that these questions will be addressed by others as well. For Memo 117, on the front page, bids will be for the $7.5 million for the North High track facility. Yet on page 3 of the document, which would be page 1, it lists Hawthorne renovations and then the track second. I'm just curious as to why that is when the initial document only states the $7.5 million for the track. Moving on from there, Memo 1, I'm guessing it's 119. I left the front page back there. As far as hiring teachers go, I have some questions I'd like clarified. It says in some of the action areas for diversifying the teaching and admin workforce that you've posted a position for a recruitment specialist and that you had a planning meeting held at MSUM and area equity and inclusion personnel discussion with firms who recruit diverse candidates are underway. So I'm just curious, with the current shortage of teachers in the district, why is it that we're narrowing our scope for potential applicants? That's how it seems to me, because on page 3 of the hiring, the search committee manual, it says that that Fargo Public Schools will actively and aggressively recruit protected group applicants. What does the district consider to be a protected group? Like I'd imagine there's several. I'd just like some clarification on that. Furthermore, also for the recruiting, in the manual, it says during the recruitment period and perhaps a few days before the posting closes, assess the candidate pool. Is it diverse? Generally speaking, the demographics of the current pool should reflect the demographics of the recruitment area. Again, why would we be narrowing the pool. It should be best possible applicant, period. Moving on to Memo 116, I'll make this quick. Segueing, Dr. Gandhi's memo states that Fargo Public Schools experience staff shortages across many departments. So again, why would we narrow our scope? And then moving on to the strategic plan at the end, it says positive collaborations with students, staff, parents, school, and community. Well, I had to beg to differ that there were parents and community members who felt they were completely unheard the last 2 years, but there's that. And I'm not even going to get into what we deem would be relevant instruction. So I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Loretta Wellington?
Hi. I'm just going to read so I don't go off the rails here. I'm Loretta Wellington. I live and work in South Fargo. I'm here to talk about teacher retention because if I'm a case study in how you treat your employees, then we have problems. FPS gave me 4 years of prior work experience when I was hired. I was promised per contract 2 years for my stint in the Air Force, 1 for graduate teaching assistantships, and 1 for teaching at Standing Rock Reservation. But I only got 3 years. I went to my building rep and my then principal. I was told it was an HR issue. After years of complaining to HR in 2014, their official response was 3 years was correct. They gave me only 1 year for my military service, not 2. Every single year, I informed HR that there was a mistake. I'd been promised 4 years. In 2020, Dr. Gandhi said I did get 2 years for my military service, but I did not get credit for teaching at Standing Rock because I wasn't licensed, but I was. So he set up a meeting with HR Director, Mr. Andring, and he asked me what I wanted. I said I just wanted that promised 4th step, but then I opened my HR file and I saw a handwritten note from the original HR Director, and it read 2 years military credit. I got mad because I had been lied to in 2014. I asked for some type of compensation for the years I was at the wrong step because of their mistake. A few days later, HR admitted that mistake by giving me that 4th step, retroactively paying me, but only for 1 year. The DO said that was fair. Well, it's not fair to me. So I asked, for the other 12 years, what experience was not worthy of payment? My years of wearing combat boots or teaching at Standing Rock. Optically, denying either doesn't look good. Dr. Gandhi then changed the rules of the game by saying, actually, by today's standards, we would not have given you credit for graduate teaching, and our lawyer has been contacted. I might have eventually let this go, but for the blatant hypocrisy I see in recent school board meetings. In April, Dr. Gandhi seemed proud of the military component of the Choice Ready program, and yet it doesn't seem that my military experience was respected enough for compensation. Same meeting, Dr. Gandhi's contract was discussed. He said people should be compensated appropriately for their work. Does that only apply to you and the perks of your job? Jim Johnson said you can't change terms of a contract unless it's mutually agreeable, but evidently that wasn't my case. Seth Holden, you said that we shouldn't be changing the rules of the game in the middle of the game. We would never dream of doing that with the teachers. Well, just ask the Tier 1 non-grandfathered folks about that. President Knutson said the district is exploring land acknowledgement statements. Is it truly sincere that you are so concerned about ancestors of Native Americans who were wronged years ago, but you have somebody right here in front of you that was wronged, and yet you are not in support of my compensation for my experience on a reservation school? Seth, you said in a meeting about negotiations that above anything else, philosophically, we always want to be able to honor, always, those step and lane changes. It's a priority. The district talks of equity a lot. I prefer the word equality. But the fact is we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for equity. Our new director of equity inclusion said equity also means righting the wrongs of the past. Well, here I am. I was wronged. But maybe equity doesn't apply to me because I don't check all the boxes for you. Do you not see the hypocrisy? Well, I hope the people that pay our salaries do see it. I hope the parents of the students that we are supposed to care about, that we are supposed to work for, care enough to contact you all directly, because I've written you all letters. Maybe they can make the district finally do right by me. Again, if my treatment is an example, it is no wonder you have a teacher retention problem. I trusted you to do right by me and honor your promise.
Thank you. Victoria Johnson.
Thank you. My name is Victoria Johnson. I'm just here to, first, I want to say thank you to Missy Agnes. You work harder than anybody I ever met. And I always take your knowledge. When things get tough, I think of peeling the onions to get to the bottom of the issue. So thank you for your wisdom. I want to talk about the BAR, which some people might not know what BAR is. It's building asset and reducing risk. It's implemented at Fargo South. And as a family advocate, I have worked with many families. My son goes to South, and he actually used that program. Respond from the teachers, how he's doing academically, impressed me. I'm here to ask the board and Dr. Gandhi and Dr. Usman that you guys continue with BAR, and I will hope that you can implement it in 6th grade level going up instead of just 9th grade, because right now it's just only for 9th graders going up, and it's only at South right now. So if the district can actually looking at turning that down to 6th grade and be able to provide the BAR program, 6th grade and going up, that will help actually our kids not only be able to graduate, but grabbing their interest in staying in our school and actually have a purpose on what they want to do in the future. So I want to say thank you to Dr. Usman for actually be the first one to bring BAR to our school district, and our school being the first one to implement BAR. So I hope that you guys really talk about that and thinking about changing it to 6th grade. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the reports section of the agenda. The first report is Memo 119, Equity and Inclusion Department Report by Dr. Usselman. Welcome.
Chair Knutson, members of the board, Dr. Gandhi, and cabinet, I'm honored to be here tonight to share with you a brief overview of the work that's done out of the Office of Equity and Inclusion. We'll see if we can get my mouse to work. I'll speak directly to the board attachment that's on the agenda. I'll explain first a little bit of background regarding my office. So I've been the Director of Equity and Inclusion since August of 2020, so it's a relatively new position. It was designed by Dr. Gandhi and his cabinet, as you see on the screen. I won't bother to read that to you, but you can see the areas of responsibility. In addition, it's a director position, so I hold supervisory responsibilities with the attendance specialists, Indian education, our cultural specialists funded under ESSER, students who lack permanent housing, and Title IX. I believe before you've seen the kind of methodology that I'm trying to work my work from, and this is a snapshot of systems change. You'll see 3 layers of systems change on the snapshot or the overview. And the bottom one, the mental models, is really where I like to spend some time because I believe it's the most transformative work. I would summarize what that graphic is saying by these 3 comments. When you think about equity and inclusion as quality control work, and what you're trying to do is figure out for whom is this system serving really well, and they're benefiting really well right now, motor on, let the system keep benefiting those students. But also recognize where there are student groups who are not benefiting in the system, and then see what you can do to change that. So these 3 things, shifting the conditions that are holding a problem in place, recognizing how we think about schooling may need to change, and then continuing to work in all 3 of the levels that you see on the screen, from the policy level all the way down through the mental model level. So that's a broad overview. I'll talk a little bit about qualitative data that we use in equity and inclusion, but first I'll mention, I'll talk about quantitative data, but I want to also mention the qualitative data. So when people don't understand equity and inclusion, they can conflate it with something like critical race theory. They're not even remotely the same thing. So when we get to where we need to be with educational equity, our students, our staff, kind of our Fargo Public School family could say, these things are true. I see these more often than I don't see them in Fargo Public Schools. And then when you get to the belief statements, this is what equity sounds like as a person, respected for my strengths, et cetera. You can go through that list as well. And again, I won't read that for you because I want to get to the action steps that I've taken in my portfolio. So I do have 6 broad objectives and activities underneath them. The one that you see on the screen right now is to expand the capacity of staff, students, and parents to learn, lead, and live in a diverse school environment. You only have to preview today's really sad news about the incident in Texas to know what happens when we're not able to do that. And so as efforts out of my shop when it comes to thinking about how can we get our skill set even stronger, there are professional development efforts that you see in the 3 boxes. We've spent time my first year on Know Yourself to Lead Yourself training. That went over very well thanks to the spirit of the people being trained. We've done the intercultural development inventory and had a work plan based on that. And we've done equity literacy trainings, primarily with administrators, but also some of those become choice sessions, as you can see on the 3rd box with staff opting in. And then the middle box says that I do work right from Fargo Public Schools policy on non-discrimination and anti-harassment, and I see the Title IX policy and investigative process. I should add before I go on to the next section, I believe how Dr. Gandhi designed this position is brilliant because it doesn't come with a budget. And so you might think, well, I'm here to ask you for a budget. I'm not. It's designed intentionally that way. Equity is not a separate silo, but it's a way of doing things. As I mentioned, it's a quality control look at things. So if you could think about quality control, for example, from a health model, like a hospital. In the hospital, you don't spend your time on working with those who aren't suffering. You let them motor on in life. You don't take anything away from them. And in a hospital, when you have people who are suffering, you step in to try and figure out why is the suffering happening and what can we do to alleviate it. So the fact that I don't have a budget forces me as a member of the teaching and learning team to do all my work through and with other people. And I believe it works really well. It might be the only way to do it, although I like to tease, I always have to bum sticky notes, like I don't even have those. But it makes us work together toward the same goal. So in this action area, we want to make certain that our students experience learning that's accurate and culturally supportive. So a couple of things that have happened. Now in our Cognio work plan, we measure outcomes by student group. So again, we look at who is doing well in the system, keep on doing well. Who is the system not serving well, and what access barriers to opportunity can we remove? And we look at that through a lens of parity and disparity. And we look at the categories of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, cultural linguistic diversity, gender, and then disability. In addition, the district has a really good policy and plan for selection of instructional materials. We do follow that policy. And finally, the thing I should have put on here, but I didn't because it was added in November, is the hiring of a cultural specialist to support Senate Bill 2304. And our cultural specialist has onboarded and done great work, I would say, across 4th and 5th grade, and then in some high school classes as well. The next area that I'll talk about in the design of this position is to deepen community engagement. The first one, I will admit, I don't have done yet. So facilitating listening sessions. When you want to know how something's working, you really need to go to the people and listen to them to hear how things are working, where they're working well, where they're not working well. So we have some input from the Peace Committee. One of the Peace Committee is a Parent Equity Advisory Committee for Education. And it includes students, parents, administrators, teachers, and support staff. They've been running since April of 21 and really do provide good insight and actually oversight in my office. And then in terms of the listening sessions, the closest I could get to that was a full day that I spent with Davies World Language students and getting input from them. So there is work to do in that area. The second box, I'm very proud of the Parent Equity Advisory Committee and their commitment to this district and making certain this district serves all children well. Again, equity is not a takeaway game from anyone who's already doing well. It's to remove those access to opportunity barriers from groups who are suffering. The Peace Committee has done such a fine job that they were instrumental in the district receiving a $50,000 teacher morale grant. It was based on the work of these parents, these students, these teachers, support staff, and administrators on the Peace Committee. I'll mention Umoja next. If you haven't become familiar with Umoja, I would advise you to. Umoja is a writer's workshop designed by Frederick Edwards and Janelle Gibson. It ran in all 3 comprehensive high schools for 12 weeks. And in this writer's workshop, the dedication was to help any student who wished to join find their voice and figure out how to lead positively. Dr. Gandhi's administrators, I attended the Umoja graduation on Friday, and it was really profound to hear the kids talk about what that program meant to them. It was very deeply moving. One of the girls was introduced as a future president, and I don't deny that. I think that could happen. But again, I assisted with Umoja. I didn't run it. It wasn't my work alone. It really, the credit goes to Frederick and Janelle. We are using equity indicators in school improvement plans. So the one that we're working on right now has to do with attendance and attendance barriers. As we know, if kids aren't coming to school, they're learning something, but it isn't algebra. And so in order to get them here and to get them to succeed, we have to figure out what are the barriers that are getting in the way. And so we're building plans around that. The next thing in my wheelhouse is to improve policy practices and legislation. So the policy that we're looking at hard this summer is the attendance policy. A broad-based group of people will be working on an improved attendance draft to get to Dr. Gandhi. This was a non-legislative year, so we didn't have a lot of action. Again, then on the handbooks, we haven't deep dived into those except to say we're going to do the attendance portion. And then we've been asked to develop a guidance document. This came from the field saying, can something be provided for staff as we work with LGBTQ plus staff and students in the district? And a work group is finalizing that document so there'd be guidance within the district. I'm a strong believer in choice-ready graduates, meaning students should graduate in a position of choice. Whether they choose to go to the military, go to the work world, go on for post-secondary education, should be their choice. Our job is to get them ready so they have a choice to make rather than having it made for them. So a speaker tonight mentioned the Building Assets Reducing Risks pilot. Again, I don't take credit for that. That is a shout out to the teachers at Fargo South who really did the heavy load and administration helped. Some indicators we have that say that is showing us promise is the number of failing grades in semester 1 dropped in half roughly, and semester 2 dropped from 55 to 30%. That is huge because if kids complete their credits in 9th grade, they're on track to graduate. And if they stumble in 9th grade, they are not on track to graduate. It is really hard to graduate on time. But the other things that were important were some of this qualitative data from the teachers' mouths. They said they valued BAR training. They felt increased connections with their students and with their teaching colleagues. They saw faster interventions. They liked the I-time, which are the citizenship, the social emotional lessons. They liked their collegial collaboration with their admins and their peers. And they said BAR never felt like a forced initiative on them. So they really grew into understanding it. Again, a shout out to them. In terms of working specifically on Indigenous students, the next one, the attendance specialists and I are developing an early warning intervention and monitoring system that we'll put into place. We did a little practicing with it in May, And like all good practice, we fell flat on our face, so we're going to stand back up and put it back into place in the fall. But it was a right effort. Our software actually failed us, the people didn't. And then the mention again about improving attendance rates of all students across the district, and particularly those demographic groups that really show access barriers. You will hear of a loud campaign on attendance coming out next fall. And then we had this idea of diversifying the teaching and the admin workforce. And as you read it, you can see we really are expanding the net to get more and more teachers. We do have a shortage of teachers, that's well known, and a shortage of subs. So allowing us to reach even broader and include more is the effort here. We did have a recruitment specialist. That's not just to get diverse candidates, but to get candidates into these jobs. We have met with Moorhead State about what would it take, how could we partner to engage more high school students in wanting to become teachers. And then Future Fargo is a program that's really outside my wheelhouse, but it's an intriguing one that perhaps you already know about or would want to learn about. We did some work on the search committee manual, and you heard or you saw that attached. It really was to make certain that our administrators knew and understood the search committee manual. Much to their credit, they designed a training for themselves around it and created a PowerPoint, so that information is available. And then it's to be used when we hire to make certain we're being fair in our hiring. Implicit bias can cause you to be unfair without knowing it, and our goal is always to be fair and to offer equal opportunity so we can get the best candidate. We did not host these employees of color meetings. That's a typo. If you look on there, it says it was scheduled for the summer of 2020. I actually wasn't employed here in the summer of 2020, so that should be the summer of 2022. I apologize for that. And then another effort in growing teachers is via Educator Rising, and you could hear about that from Denise Jonas sometime. So that's a very fast flyover of the work that's done out of my shop. Again, I'll just repeat that equity and inclusion can be conflated with things that it's not. It really is a quality control initiative to make certain that the taxpayer's investment is paying off for every single student, because every student who graduates is likely to earn on average $10,000 more per year, likely to be able to feed themselves and those they love, likely to become a member of a neighborhood and help establish a stronger community. But moreover, it really is about ensuring that kids graduate in a position of choice. I'll stand for any questions if you have them, and I'll thank you for attending to me this time.
Thank you. Robin, you had your hand up?
I did. Thank you, Dr. Uzelman. You briefly mentioned Senate Bill 2304.
Yes.
And can you explain to those that are listening how that's related to state-required Native curriculum?
I can. Thank you for that question, Chair Nelson. Senate Bill 2304 requires that schools teach Indigenous history factually and comprehensively from early times right up until the issues of today. In order to do justice to that effort, Fargo Public Schools sought people with expertise, and that cultural specialist that we hired was Ricky White. But it is a Senate bill. It is a requirement in schools, and Fargo Public Schools is ahead of the game in both developing and implementing the requirements of the law.
Any other questions by board members?
Madam President, this is David.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Dr. Usselman, thank you so much for your presentation tonight. I had a couple of questions. You heard Victoria Johnson speak very, very glowingly about BAR earlier in the meeting and wishing to see it expanded in the future. Is there a possibility that that would happen?
Thank you for that question. Conversations are open right now to expand that to the middle school. The state of North Dakota is offering some grant funds to try and encourage BAR. So based on the success that BAR has had at Fargo South, an opportunity has opened across the state of North Dakota for schools to apply. It would be my hope that a middle school may be interested. We're working through that. It always is very contextual, dependent on everything that school has going on in terms of initiatives.
Oh, thank you. My second question deals with the posting of a recruitment specialist. We as a board have heard very, very little about this. I've been getting some questions from the public, but we're looking to, I understand how we have to look harder for teachers because of the shortage, but I like to have a little more background on this. Just exactly who, it says here that we're looking for more diverse candidates. Can you explain a little more? And also, this recruitment specialist, I would assume that's somebody that we're hiring. Is that going to be an administrative position? Any idea of how much the salary we're spending on this?
I'm happy to explain what I know, and then I'll defer to my colleague, Doug Andring. A recruitment specialist isn't dedicated to recruiting only people of color, but certainly recruiting candidates for all of the jobs that we have open in Fargo Public Schools. A recruitment specialist tends to go right out into the field to the fairs, to the colleges, to where the applicants might be, and encourage them to consider Fargo Public as a place of employment. The position, I believe, is ESSER funded, Doug, and I think I should stop now because I'm going to talk about something I'm not fully versed in.
Go ahead, Doug.
You're doing great. It will be ESSER funded for the first 2 years, and it was really born out of many conversations within cabinet. We recognize that it's getting more and more challenging to recruit really any type of position. As Dr. Usman said, this position will be front and forward facing to the community, out on social media, representing Fargo Public Schools for all of our types of positions throughout nutrition services, maintenance and operations, teachers, and really kind of the face of recruitment. But recruitment really has become a function that is beyond what a lot of human resources departments are capable of. It is its own shop, really. And this position it will report directly to me. It is part of the Human Resources Office. But traditionally, recruitment has been housed somewhere within HR, and posting positions, even doing some community outreach. But in this day and age right now, when things are so hard, there's so much competition, there's less of a labor force than we've ever had before. We need to try to distinguish ourselves, and we really want to try to dedicate a position to represent us and get out there and recruit positions, especially like within our special education services. So I don't know if that answers the question fully, but
No, it does a pretty good job. Has a salary been attached to this recruitment specialist?
it has. I should know that off the top of my head. It's out on our website. I think it's like 45 to 60,000, somewhere in that range, and it's going to depend upon experience that you bring in.
And then I imagine this person would work with job fairs, career fairs, recruiting within the universities, or are we looking more broad than that? Are we looking overseas? Exactly. What would be the parameters of this?
Yep, and most of those things that you mentioned, this position will be front and forward facing in our colleges and universities. I would expect it to be looking on social media and kind of sourcing those candidates and sending them into our candidate pools, letting principals and directors, anybody with that hiring authority, know that these are good candidates. But it will be expected to do some travel, and that might be some national travel if need be. We're really starting to, and certainly this happened before I got here, but even attendance at job fairs, it's beyond regional at this point. We have to look outside of the Fargo-Moorhead area and maybe even nationally. So that will be something that this position will be expected to do.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing, and I understand very clearly how difficult it's getting to find people, and I think that makes it even more appropriate for the board to be doing everything we possibly can to make the Fargo Public Schools such a shining star that everybody wants to come here.
Well said.
Jennifer.
Thank you. A follow-up to that, Doug. So is this position intended to be operating or to be like a pilot? Because you mentioned ESSER funds being used for the first 2 years. So one of my questions is the intent that this is a continuing position from there? Or is it really we're going to revisit it in 2 years and see if our efforts actually, if we achieve the goal we set out to?
And it's going to be the latter. There's going to be, reporting that I'm going to need to see as far as in recruitment numbers and outreach, and we're going to have to figure out what that data is. And that's why we're, to mitigate learning loss, we have to get the staff in to actually be able to teach. But we do want to fund it using the ESSER dollars for the first 2 years. And then I think we'll need to make a decision, is that something that we want to institutionalize in? I certainly hope it could be, but we're going to have to support that with some sort of data that shows us that we should.
Dr. Gandhi, did you have other comments? No?
That's it.
Okay. Did you have another
Clarify,
one?
just,
Go ahead.
so Doug, does that mean that the contract that'll be offered to the individual, whomever is hired, would state that in 2 years, it's not a guaranteed position?
Yeah, their wage statement, as
Yes.
would be our practice, will say this position may be non-renewed due to
Perfect.
COVID dollars, et cetera.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate it.
Yes. And the next item is a school resource officer report. Sergeant Jacobson, welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. So through previous communications and collaborations, we realized that we have not done our due diligence as a law enforcement agency in giving you updates in the past. And so we are attempting to rectify that by having continual presentations on the work that we do and our partnerships. And so we're going to kind of start vague and broad today, and then in the future, based off your questions and concerns, we can continue future presentations based off of your requests. And so we've had a lot of change within the Fargo Police Department over the last several years. We welcomed a new chief about 18 months ago, and with that came some shifts, change, and we now have a very distinct vision, mission, and value that represents us in the Fargo Police Department, which is stated here. So there are multiple divisions within the Fargo Police Department. The School Resource Officer program, we fall into our neighborhood services. That's often more commonly known as our patrol division. And so within those that answer directly to patrol calls, then there is specialized services, of which the school resource officers and our community engagement team falls from. And so we are headed by Captain Helmick oversees all of neighborhood services. Lieutenant Alfeld oversees our specialized services. And our specialized services encompasses all of the various bullet points that are shown here. And so really, it's any of those assistance services that provide our supplement our direct patrol response. So under specialized services, you come to the community engagement team. And so I currently supervise our community engagement team, which when we are fully staffed, we have 7 school resource officers, we have 3 community trust officers, and we have 1 cultural liaison officer. It should be noted that we are not currently fully staffed, and we've had quite a bit of changeover in staffing over the last year, which we are transitioning and really just kind of picking it up. And so just for information and knowledge, 5 out of my 7 school resource officers that are currently in place are brand new over the last, so we've had a lot of changeover. We've had some promotions. The school board hired one of my former school resource officers, taking him from one of your buildings and doing a phenomenal job. But we've seen a lot of shift. And I just want to state that to you, but at the same time know that we are very committed and have a high level of expectation when it comes to the training and qualifications of the individuals, police officers, before we put them into the schools. And so my responsibilities are listed here. Some of my personal history, I've been with the Fargo Police Department a little over 15 years. So in between my times in patrol, I have done about 7 years as our Cultural Diversity Liaison Officer and our Native American Liaison Officer. And then I also was a former school resource officer at South High School for several years. And then was promoted, went back to patrol for a period of time, and now oversee our community engagement team, where the overall mission of the team is to really do outreach, education, engagement to anyone that has any type of questions, concerns, or barriers to law enforcement. It is our primary goal to keep our finger on the pulse of the needs of the community, then to evaluate those needs and determine if it is appropriate for us as a law enforcement agency to attempt to bridge that gap and meet those needs of those community members, or find out who is already doing that work, spotlight and or partner with them so that we ultimately meet the overall needs of our community with a very strong emphasis on our youth. So I do a lot of collaborative engagement with so many of your school staff. So we have really done a great job, and I give a lot of that credit to Missy Eitznes and Dr. Gross at just being so gracious with their time and willing to meet with Lieutenant Ulfelt and I so that we can really just come together so that we are all on the same page with expectations, understandings, communication, that we collaborate and communicate and develop a safe environment for the students and the population in general, but then also strengthen each other's work and making sure that we are doing best by you, the staff, and the children. We are also very particular at making sure that you understand what our roles are, what our policies are, so that we are adequately and appropriately staying in our lane and communicating and educating you at what our protocols, procedures, and responses would be so that there's understanding. We are very invested in communication, collaborations, but also transparency so that we are making sure that you understand what we do and why we do it and how we do it, and answering any of those questions. We are a department that is led by a great group of individuals who recognizes that there is continual room for growth, evolution, and change in our department, and that we are not where we ever want to be, but we're also not where we used to be either, and we continue to see a lot of positive progression and change within our department. And so not only do I collaborate with your administration, I work with your social workers, your SWIFTs, your counselors, and I sit on a variety of liaisoning boards, not only with the school district, but with communities that would also impact the school district. So I do consult with your student attendance review board, your regional behavior review board. Trying to make sure I get it all. I work and oversee the logistics for the Cass Clay Unified School Response, which is kind of an educational group of school administrators, service providers, and school resource officers, so that we are adequately and appropriately information sharing and keeping each other informed of the things that are occurring regionally and not just within our school district or within our community. I work with the North Dakota Association of School Resource Officers. NASRO is an association that's nationally the Association of School Resource Officers, of which we provide or receive all of our qualification and training through. So all officers, before they are allowed to be assigned and working in one of your school buildings, are required to, at a minimum, receive the beginner NASRO course, and it is a 40-hour class. And then there are other layers after they've been in the school. Typically, after their first year, we send them to so it's first SRO Basic, and then there's SRO Advanced, and then afterwards NASRO also holds varying national conferences. And if we can or cannot make it to those, we collaborate and work with our state North Dakota Association of School Resource Officers, and we hold conferences as well. Several of my officers will be attending that this summer, and quick plug, we are hosting next year's North Dakota Association of School Resource Officers, that conference here regionally. And the goal is to not just have a bunch of cops in the room, and we do invite social workers and counselors and administrators to having those conversations as well. And I'll talk about it a little bit further as well. And when it comes to educational diversion, we have seen a drastic, sadly, decrease in funding by the state and federal government to fund educational diversion programming for young people that ultimately make poor choices and violate a law. But we recognize that young people make mistakes. And that we want to keep them out of our judicial system as often as possible. And so we are very committed and dedicated to diverting kids to education so that there's a balance between holding them accountable, but yet doing it in a reasonable and appropriate manner. But due to a lot of that decrease in funding, and of course, agencies such as LSS, who was one of our primary diversion organizations going out of business, we are struggling with keeping up with some of those types of things. And so to overcome that, we are committed as a Fargo Police Department to developing our own educational diversion program, of which we hope to roll out next fall. We are hosting an extensive training program this summer, and then we will be getting all of the logistics in place after that training takes place. And we've also communicated that with the school district and our commitment to that, and your restorative practitioner will be partnering with us in some of that as well, because of the training that we will be providing in this diversion is very restorative practice focused with talking circles and emotional intelligence and those types of things of which we are committed to. And so we are going to be spending a lot of time and effort developing that over the summer. And then some of the things that may intersect with your missions, things I do liaison with our Human Relations Commission, our Native American Commission. I currently staff our police departments. I'm the staff member for our Police Advisory and Oversight Board. I also staff our Badges of Unity Fund, which is a nonprofit within the Fargo Police Department that you often hear Robin talking about as she is currently the president of our board. And so we have been very blessed as a police department in having such support from our community members in their donations and the donations that come in to that nonprofit that is overseen by Dakota Medical Foundation. We are able to provide an extensive amount of programming for your students and our community kids, which we will talk about in a further slide as well. I do extensive liaisoning with juvenile court and really any community organization that services youth. We try to keep our finger on the pulse of the programming that is in existence so that we aren't recreating the wheel, and then we're communicating so that all the other community members are aware. And then we then, again, like I said, we analyze if there's a gap and who might be appropriate to meet those gaps and those types of things. So defining, many people are unsure of what the roles and responsibilities of a school resource officer are. And so typically, as trained under the NASRO concept, we follow the triad concept. So of course, we are law enforcement officers that are trained. And so safety is one, if not the biggest role that we play, but we just want to ensure you that it is not just physical safety, that we are very cognizant of emotional safety of your students as well, and recognize that we keep our finger on the pulse of what is going on in the building so that people are not only physically but emotionally and academically safe as well, and the resources that we can provide and supplement to your school staff because of our collaborations outside of the building. We partner as educators of law-related topics, and then of course informal counselors as mentors as adults and professionals that are located inside of the building. And so we list kind of the goals of the SRO program here for you, and I don't want to read them off to you unnecessarily, but really it's just to provide that safe environment like we talked, but it's really fostering that positive relationship with the young people. You know, we are not only here for threats and threat assessments, though that is we just really want to be part of the success team of the young people in the buildings and know that we work really hard at empowering parents, empowering kids, but also empowering your staff in your building so they have the resources necessary and all of the right people at the table with the right perspectives to really meet the needs collectively of the individuals in your building. So we also, of course, teach the value of the legal system, promote respect for property and people, teach students how to reduce the likelihood of victimization, positive attitudes, you know, towards law enforcement. We just really want to engage and trust build with what we call our, you know, our islands of your 1,000 residents inside of your building and things like that. And so we talked about diversion. We've seen, sadly, a decrease in that. COVID had some of an impact on that as well, but a lot of the biggest impact was just due to funding, but also organizations not being available to divert to. And so we're taking that out of the equation. And so funding will never be an issue, and we will have our own self-sustaining diversion program, where kids, when they commit certain low-level offenses and meet the qualifications for diversion, they will be sent never outside of our own programming, will never make it to juvenile court, and we will provide them that education and resources with that accountability and communication with their parents. Some of the major community projects that we have partnered specifically with the Fargo Public Schools with is our Break the Silence Together.org video. Historically, pre-COVID, we were partnering with the school district and going into the buildings and providing what we call our assemblies programs. And we would bring in a motivational speaker and typically an entertainer. That stopped due to COVID, understandably, when you didn't want to get your whole school building together in one room. But at the same time, we were seeing the negative effects to COVID and some of those things in our community, and we saw an increase in depression and mental health, suicide ideation, and sadly, multiple completions to suicide. And we were understandably responding and distraught over that and wanted to be proactive as much as possible. And so when COVID was starting to wind down is not the correct phrase, but when the restrictions within the school were lessening and we started to have dialogue about would it be appropriate for us to start those assembly programs again. Initially, the school district was understandably not quite ready. But we were really motivated at really tackling the conversation of suicide and suicide ideation. And one of your principals really challenged us to see if there was another platform of which we could meet that need, thus the creation of our Break the Silence Together.org video. And we then presented it to the schools to use as a free resource. And your high schools use that. Many of your middle schools, we've done community events and such, and it really just spotlights individuals who have been drastically impacted. If you've never seen it, I highly encourage you to do so. And then we also broke down the 25-minute video that was created with the intent of it being like a classroom presentation. We did break it down to a series of 3 to 5 minute segments for social media platforms that we put out during Suicide Prevention Month. And so this year, actually just a couple of weeks ago, we started implementing that phase 2 of that platform because we didn't want to stop the momentum. And we had a phenomenal partnership developed with the Med family out of Davies, who are spotlighted in the police department's video. And Elizabeth and her husband Todd have started the 463 Foundation in Liam's honor, and we have partnered with them in the school district, and we brought a motivational speaker, and we've transitioned back to the philosophy of the school assemblies. And so it's a little bit broken up this year. We did Discovery and Davies. We did those presentations already, and then we did a community night, of which is advertised here, and then we will be hitting a lot more schools that the week of September 12th as well, and another community event. And so we will likely start transitioning back and forth to the creation of videos, and then every other year, probably that assembly philosophy, as long as the school district is willing to host us. And then what do our SROs do over the summer? They do a lot. And so we do have an officer that works in your summer school. We partner with Safety Town, you name it. We do a whole bunch of different engagement, outreach, education, events, and those types of things. And so this is the youth programming. We, other than the outdoors program, the New American Survival Swim Lessons, the boxing, the kickboxing, and the self-defense program is something that we offer year-round. And so we collaborate with your counselors and social workers on kids that are struggling in one manner or not, and they refer us to some programming that is at no cost to them. And we're just looking to provide them with an activity, some positive peer engagement, some positive peer mentorship, leader mentorship by the coach, and then a law enforcement officer is also present during those activities. And we have been doing those for the last several years. And we are also in the beginner phases at exploring expanding the types of programming, recognizing that not all kids want physical activities. And so we are looking to develop a program that is yoga mindfulness focused and meeting some of those collaborative needs as well. We've dabbled a little bit in seeing if our kids wanted to garden or cook, and we hit some barriers there. And so we continue to explore what's appropriate for us to expand. We have also dabbled with some art programming as well. So we really appreciate the support that you as a school district gives to us as SROs, and we never want you to think that we take that for granted. We have a series of, a variety of events that we, attend, and questions or concerns or anything? Yeah.
Dr. Newman? Well, first of all, just thank you for this report, Officer Jacobson, and thank you for everything that you guys do. It's really incredible to see it all. I'm looking forward to the future reports. I have a couple of questions. I'll start with this one. So you mentioned there's 7 SROs, and then we have 3 community trust officers. What is the difference?
Sure.
In that?
So we have one an assigned officer in every middle school and high school, and then I'm sort of the 8th as a trained school resource officer. I collaborate with the administration, but I also am your primary liaison to all of your elementary school administration. And then our community trust officers really do a lot of that education and engagement that would be parallel to what my SROs do in the schools. They would do that in the community. And so we would keep our finger on the pulse of the needs of the community, and their mission might ebb and flow greater or more differently. So if we're seeing more concentration needed in maybe post this situation, or like more presence downtown, or maybe we're going to focus on homelessness or adult mental health or chemical dependency. Sometimes our vision and mission for our trust officers will be dependent upon the greater need of, sometimes it's youth focused, sometimes it is not. However, I am a big advocate of cross training. And this kept me out of hot water this year, because I implemented at the start of this school year the cross training so that all of my community trust officers were also SRO qualified, though they are not assigned full-time in the school, so that we could develop a substitute program so that when my officers are out for training and those types of things, that they still have someone in the building. And that fared us very well when we saw several got promoted, when you snatched one from me. I'm not, just a little bit bitter, just teasing. And then we had 2 leave, one moved out of the area, those kinds of things. And so we could still fulfill our commitment to those buildings by having trained appropriate individuals. But eventually, once they're fully trained, they liaison with the community. And one of my trust officers is also like our LGBTQ liaison, and then, like I said, our cultural, does that outreach and engagement to our cultural communities and Native American population as well.
If I may, just that actually segues nicely because I think I've asked this before, but I personally would like to see a greater presence of our SROs at our elementary level. At the third slide of your presentation, a lot of what you were talking about, your roles and responsibilities, they would all benefit the elementary age children, I feel like, working in more upstream capacity. So is there a role for, I suppose, the community trust officers maybe to rotate through our elementary schools and have a greater presence there instead of just at the middle and high school level? And especially given the news, the tragic news out of Texas today in elementary school, and I mean, all the things happening, just, yeah, sure.
So we have been looking at our needs, and I'll give you an example of a need that has really changed, and I'm sad about it, but we have seen an increase of vaping at the elementaries. We don't want to criminalize vaping because we really believe it is something that we have to look at through a different lens. But sometimes too, it is very helpful to have a Christie or a community officer with us as we're explaining to parents that we can't give these things to kids. And they help us through some of those situations. So it doesn't mean it's ending up in any discipline like that, but it's really educating, which we believe in. And so we are busy buildings. We do think that maybe we're going to have to explore that next year about looking at how do we have more access at the elementaries for education. So I appreciate the comment.
Dr. Gandhi?
Yep, and just to capitalize that, I think Missy's comments, capitalizing on Missy's comments, Tracy, I think your question is, is a two-pronged solution. One is, you talked about the rotation of the cultural trust officers who focus on the larger needs. We have access to the rotation, SROs. If there's needs for elementary schools, we have that. That's one piece that Missy's talking about. Is there a gap in services or something that we can use? But the 7 SROs that we have at our secondary buildings, they're there on a permanent status. So we can approach this by looking at, do we need a full-time person at elementary schools, which would be a different function, or do we need more of an increased presence of SROs based on specific services or specific needs, such as vaping and things of that nature? So I think we're having conversations on what do both tracks look like. Yeah.
Robin, go ahead.
3 points. Number one, this is a great example of community partnerships and leveraging taxpayer dollars. For example, I know that one of the Fargo Public Schools restorative justice employees is partaking at a reduced rate with your training. So thank you for helping us leverage tax dollars. Number two, you can donate to the Badges of Unity Advisory Board through the Impact Foundation through DMF. Another great example of public-private partnerships. And number three, I think there were some changes recently because SRO positions were difficult to fill because SROs were employed through the school year in our schools, but then were put in summer shifts to fill vacation slots. Is that changing, Sergeant Jacobson?
Yes, and so recognizing our own inner team retention, really stabilizing our senior officers and recruiting individuals who their summer time is valuable to them. I was very intentional about ensuring that we were transparent with our recruitment about and stabilizing their summer schedules, but also their passions don't stop once the school doors close when it comes to education and engagement and meeting the needs of young people. And so when I took over the community engagement team, we saw a little bit of a transition because I was the first supervisor of the SROs that had ever formerly been an SRO. And so I like to think some additional insight and validity came to the position when we started to really be intentional about having conversations with our administration about what we needed to do to recruit the best candidates to be in your schools, and then how do we keep them there by making sure that we provided scheduling stabilization and appropriate supports and services.
Seth, go ahead.
Just a little bit about the diversion program. I'm completely in favor of everything that happens there. I don't ever like to see a person's future have barriers because of decisions that were made when we're young and not fully developed as adults. However, on the list, I did notice that drug and alcohol offenses were not on that list, and I would like to know why that is.
So that we are content. We will continue to evolve. So the ones that are on there that were previously diverted, we collaborated with the community resources that were appropriate for them. So oftentimes that we found when the underlining concern was mental health, we didn't have the direct relationship and the capability to require the services. And so oftentimes it went into the very next level. So they would go to juvenile court and then they were diverted to our local community resources for mental health and chemical dependency, recognizing that when we develop our own, we will have to start out a little bit smaller, and so may take a step back at first and not necessarily be able to divert with all of the offenses, but then with the long-term goal of continuing to expand and evaluate and determine what is appropriate. We are also researching and determining which types of offenses are appropriate for us to tackle, for our own education and things like that. When it's a chemical dependency or mental health one, we would prefer to develop the relationships with the service providers in those areas of expertise. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering that appropriately. So we started out small just because we were also we couldn't tackle every offense initially. And so when we evaluated which were the ones that we felt that would be the most impactful based on funding, and we evaluated how many come in and how who are they coming in from, and what are cases most likely to see recidivism, and those types of evaluations for where are they coming from and what were the greater needs. Typically, through our analysis, that's where we came up with the offenses.
Okay, I'm just looking at the list. I just feel that theft and simple assault might be a little bit more disruptive to other students than a drug and alcohol offense. And if we're going to give a little bit of leeway to people, maybe things that are their personal choice that affect them and not other students might do well to be on that list as well.
Dr. Gandhi?
Yeah, and I think just nothing for no actions today, but I think just as we look at legislative session and our path forward, this has been a conversation that school districts have started, and we've started here in Fargo. I think there will be a great opportunity with law enforcement down the road, along with public health as well, and private medical providers as well. There currently, as we talk about mental health and behaviors resulting from mental health, there isn't a differentiator between what behavior is a product of a mental health illness that needs a treatment versus what behaviors are addressed through disciplinary actions or punitive measures. And I think without that distinction, and in both Century Code for schools and then possibly even for law enforcement, it's always going to be that fine line of understanding which behaviors need to be treated versus which behaviors need to have a consequence to it. That's going to be a struggle that school districts are currently struggling with. And as we know, mental health continues to be a spectrum of not just tier 3 needs, but there's a set of services that all students need, and we need to be able to figure out the path that we can equip individuals both in our society and within school settings to be able to rectify and provide the treatment that someone needs, because if not, the only solution for school districts and or law enforcement sometimes does become that standard of consequence because of a behavior versus the treatment that we truly need to get to the root of the issue.
And we in the Fargo Police Department are very committed to ensuring that we are not criminalizing mental health behaviors, and that when a child is in crisis, whether mental health or chemical dependency, that they are being sent to the appropriate medical services within the community. And that we are very proud within our police department too of receiving additional training with crisis intervention training that we have to verbally de-escalate individuals that are in crisis and recognizing the complexities that incorporate that so that we respond in a non-aggressive but safe and appropriate manner.
Thank you. Any other questions? Lots of good detail. Thank you for being here. We'll look forward to the next report. All right, we have a few other reports still this evening. Do we want to take a 5-minute break? It's been a little over an hour. Okay, so back at 1:45. And I'll be in here in just a minute. We're going to move on to the operational plan for 2021-22, and it is Memo 116. Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. As in your board packet, you will see that every May we provide the board with an updated operational plan that talks about where our status is of the action items that we were tasked to do for this school year when the operational plan was presented at the start of the school year. As always, I always want to recognize and start with the fact that Cabinet, myself, we get to complete this document, but the work really sits with our staff, and we continue to be amazed and grateful for the incredible staff that we have in Fargo Public Schools that keep our mission of educating and empowering all of the students moving forward on a daily basis, despite the numerous different challenges that that's just part of the dynamic environment in which we get to serve our community and our students. So extremely grateful for all of our staff and the completion of the tasks. As always, there's going to be some things that we're going to carry over to next year, some things that are completed this year, and then some things that we will use as a decision point on whether we want to continue that activity moving forward or not, based on the needs of our students and whether that yielded the results that were desired accordingly. I do anticipate that the operational plan will look different next year. We are, as most board members know, we anticipate refreshing our strategic plan for this fall. So we will have some changes that will be aligned to that, specifically around, I think, as we have over the last couple of years recognized that there's so much misinformation and disinformation that sometimes gets shared as education becomes more politicized. We are going to want to make sure that we are defining what our measures of success look like, where we want to be as an organization, and making sure that the indicators that we use for our performance are being used just for that purpose, and really being able to provide the board a good snapshot of how you monitor getting towards the results that you want to, in terms of what the board policy defines and where we are aligned with our strategic plan. So the format might look just a little bit different, or some words, but we will present the operational plan for next year in the fall as we normally do. And if there's any questions around the action items for this year or where we are, we're happy to answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Board members have any questions, comments? Are there none? Well, Dr. Gandhi, it seems like we are able to move on into the next item if there aren't any questions. Okay, thank you. Then we will go on to the Fea report. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. This is my last duty as the official vice president of FEA. I'm demoting myself, so. Lots of pulses all in the same place, so I'm going to start with some of the hopes. I did a little data collection, Doug. I started looking at our school years from 15-16, 18-19, and then our current year. Just tallying resignations and years of experience, and really just trying to look at where we're kind of headed. I mean, we know it's bad. We've heard it's bad. As a department chair for the English department, I've been fortunate to get to do some interviews. It's been interesting this year looking at apps, and it's kind of been the trend over the last few is watching them deteriorate in number and quality and options. 2015 and 16, we had 42 resignations. What I noted mostly was I wanted to look at the 1 to 5 year, because that seems to be when we lose most. And it is true with our data, the little bit of data collection that I did. 24 of those 42 were 1 to 5 year teachers. 18-19, we had 71 resignations, and 36 of those were in the 1 to 5 year range. I skipped COVID years, trying to find at least a little bit of normalcy. I don't know if we're ever going to get back to that, but this year, as of right now, I did not get the addendum, so I don't know if there are any more resignations on it that you had, but there are 112 this year, and I did a May to May count. 80 of those are in teaching 1 to 5 years. So I guess my plea, just to keep it on the map, as we've hired a recruitment specialist, maybe we can also help retain. and keep that on our focus as far as what we need to do, maybe finding out more specifically what we can do, what we can fix, what we can make better. As a mentor myself, we will be mentoring 3 new people in just the English department at South High. Mine is in her 2nd year, but we have 2 coming in. One is brand new, and then one has a couple 8 or 9 years experience, thankfully. So she'll have 1 year mentee work to do, but which is also another load that is put on all of us that are still here, trying to help these new people get adjusted and feel comfortable and not overwhelmed and learn the new systems. So that is my first plea and reminder, to continue to look at how we can keep our good, strong people. Also, and very much about getting the diversity. We need it, we know it. We also know that's hard to come by, so we do appreciate that that's also on the agenda. I didn't think I was gonna hear so much awesomeness about South High, so I am gonna just glow in that moment a little bit longer. Victoria left, but I did want to at least give a shout out to Dr. Shannon Mortrude, one of our assistant principals who has been the lead of BAR, and so many other things at South High. She has made us all better. Everything she does, I think, to support BAR, to support teachers, to support her admin team is really awesome. So I just wanted to throw that kudos out. Victoria won't hear it here, but maybe she'll hear it later. And I do hope that they do expand it. It has been going well. It's been interesting to see the incoming freshmen change from that August to May. Slow and steady, but it's happened. And it's helped. I think it helps teachers too, just to know that you are supported with each other. There is some extra meetings and trainings, but again, it does not feel like a forced meeting or not a useful meeting. So I will reiterate that from Dr. Usselman also, that is true. We did say that. My final piece will be another celebration from FEA. We handed out 4 scholarships this May to 4 of our members, young students also. So I just wanted their names to be known. Aiden Hansen from Davies High School was awarded our FEA scholarship. Morgan Reeder from South High was awarded our FEA scholarship. And then Jillian Oliphant, who attends Detroit Lakes High School, and Tara Clark, who attends Moorhead High School, received the scholarships this year. So kudos to them. Thank you for letting us fundraise with sweatshirts and jeans and things like that, because that's how we raise the money to do that. So we hope to continue and keep offering that money and support our future students on their next generation of support. So thank you all for the time tonight.
Thanks for being here. Dr. Gandhi, your superintendent's report.
Thank you. I think it's been mentioned a couple times today, but I just want to first start by recognizing the tragedy that happened in South Texas, and just know that anytime that there's a school district that's in pain, that public education institutions across the nation are in pain and feel that too. That's a tragedy that's impacting our nation, and unfortunately something that does need to be addressed in some shape or way or form, and that's simply just to say and recognize that happened today, and that we stand with everyone that's impacted in South Texas. I also briefly mentioned a little bit, and just want to respond to some of what FEA said as well. Our teachers work incredibly hard, our educators across our district, and that's everywhere from our maintenance and operations staff to our nutrition service staff to para-educators, every department, every individual, they work tremendously hard as well. As we go into the next school year, one of the things that we're really going to talk about is how do we able to communicate the successes that we have in the district and contextualize some of the data points that are used to generalize education in general. The information that was just shared about the number of resignations, that information was a snapshot in chat time, and as self-admitted limited amount of data, we have that comprehensive data set for board members that is often shared. We also have data sets about why individuals leave within our district. The resignations we've had this year, we do an exit survey. I think that information's been shared before as well, and it's also available where more often than not, the situation is because of a spouse member moving or different situations as well. One of the areas where we see a critical need is continuing to be in the area of special education as it relates to our teaching staff specifically. And that's one of the reasons that we are very much advocates for our All for One program, and grateful for the 180 staff members that are going to be participating in that program this year, and knowing that we'll have more individuals sign up next year as well, that is something that we need to work on as a district too. That is where we've always critically had a critical mass of shortage and areas to fill. So when we do see some of those resignations that are in that 1 to 5 years, these are the conversations that we have in when were they hired and in for what position, because sometimes some of those individuals are the individuals that intended to be an elementary general or secondary general content area teacher and ended up taking a plan on file position, and they're provided with that opportunity the following year as well. So that's where some of that trend is. There's obviously context to every situation. We, as Fargo Public Schools, you're going to see more resignations because we've also hired more teachers with our ESSER funds than any other school district in North Dakota. We've invested more of our dollars in our human capitals with positions that we've needed. We've hired more coaches to step out of the classroom and train new teachers as well. A couple of the examples at South High in their ELA department, our ESSER program has been so successful, we've had multiple teachers at South High actually step up and say, I want to do the ESL ESSER version and teach the ESL class because we know it's easier for us to backfill the general ed ELA position or science position. So that's a success that we've seen as well, and just wanted to provide some context around that data.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Anyone have questions? Brian, go ahead.
Not a question, just to add to what you're saying. On Sunday in Grand Forks, I was talking to an assistant principal. They're short 23 special educators, and they've adopted what we've done with the One for All for One program.
Thank you, Brian. All right, moving on to the consent. Jennifer, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so Rupak, you did send us exit survey information, in April, and I'm just curious to one of your comments, you said most of them that had left were due to following a spouse. Did I understand you correctly? And my second question, if I may just throw it out there, was it 98? It says in February of 21. Would that correlate with the 112 resignations in total? Or can you kind of explain that number?
Right now, on top of my head, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can definitely get that data to you to hopefully answer both questions and get that to you from HR.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Robin?
I move approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Newman. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same
Yes.
sign. The consent agenda is approved. On to business. Bond sale results, memo 117. Jackie Gapp, would you like to introduce that?
I would love to. So bonds were sold, and we have Ann Willett from PFM who is here. So I'll ask her to come up, and she will go over the results of sale with you. Then we will ensure, as was pointed out, there is a little reference to Hawthorne in the resolution that we will have struck and when we sign off on the final ones upon your approval.
Welcome.
I just turned it up. Now it's on. All right, good evening. Thank you for having me. President Knutson and members of the board, Dr. Gandhi, and Jackie. Thanks for having me today. We did take bids for the track project this morning. We received 5 bids. Right now the market is a little bit volatile, so we're just not seeing as many people bid on bonds. But the winning bidder was Northland Securities out of Minneapolis. Their rate that they bid was a 3.45%. So I don't know if any of you remember when we last sold bonds, but rates have gone up a ton this year. I'm sure you've heard that. So if you look on the results of sale, the first 3 bids, they were very close together. They were within just a few hundredths of a percentage. So we think that the bids that we received and the winning bid are a very competitive bid and a good market bid because we're seeing such a small spread between those first 3. So we're very happy about that. Are there any questions that you all have? I know it's very, very short summary, but we're happy with the results, so.
Any questions from board members? No questions. Okay, thank you for being here. And Jackie, do you have anything else to add at this point?
No, not well, just maybe one item, which we have done. So just a reminder that in this bond sale and the principal and interest amortization, there's a piece broken out with the park district for the parking lot portion that they will be reimbursing us for. And so I will be working with Tara now that we would have some final amortization schedules so we can put together an agreement that as well will have to come back before you for approval.
Thank you. Jim?
I'd like to make a motion that the board adopt the resolution authorizing the establishment of the terms of the limited tax school bond, Series 20022A, with the modification that Jackie indicated to the language regarding Hawthorne being struck out of the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Seth. Jim, anything else?
Nope.
Okay, any questions or discussion? Anne Marie, please go ahead and call the roll.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
On to board reports, committee liaison and correspondence reports. Nikki, would you like to start?
You're not on. Okay. Sorry about that. Likely to miss something here. Just making a quick pass through. Since our last board meeting, May 12th, I attended the all-day North Dakota State ESSA committee meeting. I've been serving on that task force for several years. Enjoy the opportunity to get together with everybody there. Also that evening attended the Discovery Band concert. I always love seeing our teachers and our kids in action. My sixth grader was in it, so it was band. It was a lot of fun. Then we had CEA on May 17th, and that evening I had the pleasure, FEA had sponsored a teacher's retirement event at Rowe Farm, and what a blast that was. I got to talk to the teachers that were there about how long they had been with us and the buildings that they had been in, and a couple of them had not even changed buildings, which I always find interesting. And one sweet gal that I talked to, I asked her, I said, what makes you stay? Why not move around? Because I talk to people who always say it's nice to move buildings periodically. And she started to tear up and she said the people. And she was at Jefferson, and I think that meant a lot. And I've spent the time in Jefferson and have appreciated everybody there. And it was just really touching to be there. We had some really wonderful people, and it was fun to see and visit with them. I'm sure there's probably more, but I don't have it written down. So thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Brian?
I've attended some committee meetings, looking forward to the GED graduation on Thursday. That's always my favorite time of year. It's one of the reasons why I love being on the board, is to shake all those young people's hands, tell them congratulations as they set out in the world and come back to work and pay taxes back to their local school district. The other thing, we have a planning committee on Friday. Looking forward to that as well. It looks like it's a heavy schedule there, so it looked to me like it was about a 2 or 3 hour committee meeting. I don't know. That's all.
Thank you, Brian. Robin?
Thank you, Rebecca. The only thing I have to report really is a governmental affairs committee related. I attended the Chamber's Military Affairs and Public Policy Joint Committee meeting, and we can expect some legislation about military children and how often they move. They are going to request some open enrollment and to be able to register students prior to residency was the first one. And then also to allow for virtual learning to complete semesters for those that are relocated in the middle of the semester. I don't know enough about that to comment, but that is something that we can expect this legislative session in January of 2023. That's it.
Thank you, Robin. Jennifer.
I actually have a question. So if I may, Rupak, this question is for you. So around the operational report, I expected some more discussion and I had some questions, and then I was surprised by some of the information you shared in terms of the changes, pleasantly surprised in what will be presented in the fall. So if I may just ask one clarifying question around that, is the intent then that you will recommend to the board that our policies be updated as well to reflect that in our results measures, or not? You'll just be reporting it differently. Does that make sense?
Go ahead, Dr. Gandhi.
Current board policies are tied to results that are in our strategic initiatives, that are in our strategic plan. So as we update our strategic plan and take a look at our strategic initiatives and the indicators and the results that are all within, then they will have to update our results policies as well, because they'll have to be aligned.
So let me clarify, because our results policies are only really tied to the fact that there's a strategic plan. They're not tied to each goal in particularly. And it sounded to me like you were being more detailed moving forward and tying it to those measures. And it's also something we can visit about offline, but that's, it's been something that I've advocated for a long time. And so when you said that, I was pleasantly surprised, but also wondering how that will then change our board result policies.
Happy to talk online. I think some of the this conversation will probably be best suited after we go through the strategic plan update, because I'll provide the framework for everything that's within that plan and then how that gets monitored, or what gets monitored versus measured or evaluated. So happy to talk offline, but as we update that plan this fall, it's not, I think I'll provide some more context.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else?
Nothing else to report, thank you.
All right, Seth, go ahead.
Just last week on Wednesday, I attended and actually performed at the Indian Ed graduation event that was held at Discovery. It was a really good event. I was really excited to see a friend of mine, Guy Fox, teaching young people how to drum and sing, and passing that knowledge and that part of the culture on to younger kids. Is really cool to see that, and just want to give props to Melody and all her team over there for the work that they do. And then only other thing is, looks like I'll have time to make it to the North High Orchestra concert tonight. So thank you.
Dr. Newman.
Thank you. And sticking with the music theme, I attended the Davies Choir concert, as well as the Davies Theater Awards Banquet, which was really cool. It's a bunch of student-voted awards, some funny, some not as flattering, and some very flattering. So it was the dramatic kids are very funny. And then on May 17th, we had a CEA committee meeting. On May 18th, I attended an NDSBA Lunch and Learn about the function of the board and the role of the board president. And then I've met twice, on May 13th and this morning, for the new Council of School Health Policy co-chair role, which I'm looking forward to. And I'm looking forward to South High graduation. I think we all go to a graduation this coming weekend. So that's all for me.
Well, thanks, everyone. This is a big week. Oh, yes, David. David, are you still there?
I am, thank you.
Go ahead.
Nothing to report other than the fact that, as you mentioned, we have a planning committee meeting on Friday, and I'll see you there.
All right, sounds good. We have governance meeting on the 29th at 7:30 in the morning. There has been a little bit of progress. Excuse me?
Governance is on the 26th.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm looking at the wrong I was looking at the wrong date, clearly, so sorry. Yeah, I stand corrected. Let's see here. There has been some work that's been done on the memorandum of understanding from the board and the FEA regarding the negotiations training. And so that was the third MOU that needed to be addressed as a result of us having an assigned agreement with the FEA, between the FEA and the board. And so there have Seth and Grant and Kim, Grant and Kim with the FEA, and Seth and I met to talk about some different options for training, and we talked about some shared goals that we would like to get out of the training. Those shared goals landed on kind of trust building, relationship building, so more the working together, how we work together, how we work cooperatively as we are negotiating versus negotiating models. And so I know that there are dates that all of us board members we've been asked to hold tentative upcoming. So there are 4 dates that we've been asked. So just keep that in your schedule and you'll learn more. And we're just moving forward, and we'll let you know once there's been a group or an individual selected to help provide us with that training. And then we'll be discussing that a little bit at the governance committee meeting this week too. And I just wanted to say that it's such a big week. This week we have, how many graduations are we going to be celebrating? How many graduates? Oh my goodness sakes. And it's the end of a lot for some, and the beginning for so many others. And I think we just have to congratulate everyone that has been involved in helping to get us to the end of the school year. And as we were sitting in this meeting tonight, I was thinking, oh gosh, we're really leading up to so much at the end of the week. And so saving up our energy and celebrating, and lots of graduation celebrations. So I hope that everyone has a great rest of the week, and that we can celebrate when we're handing out those diplomas. It's, that's really the culmination of a lot of work. That's what we want every child to be able to get to, is be able to, whether they're crossing our stage or another stage, is they're getting a diploma at whatever that stage looks like, whether it's virtual or an actual stage. So it's really pretty cool. And we're all involved in that. So thank you guys for being part of helping those kiddos get there. And with that, we will adjourn. Our next meeting is June 14th. Have a great night.